A lot of times, not feeling inspired actually comes from fear. And it could be a fear of creating something that you're not happy about. It could be that your skill is not at the level that you want it to be. But it's most of the time not really related to feeling creative or feeling inspired, but mostly by fearing you're not going to make what you're actually wanting to make. Now that we've established our why, our what, and our long-term plan, we are going to treat this creative work as work. If you're not familiar with my work and this is the first video you come across, my name is Roxy. I'm an artist. I mainly paint with oil paints and I used to paint a lot with acrylic. You see behind me some canvases that I made and I focus on figurative art, very colorful, a lot of self-portraits, a lot of introspective work. But next to my personal work, I also do illustrative work, commercial work for commissions for brands, and I do live illustration work. So it's a lot of variety in where my income comes from. Let's establish first what we are not going to do. We are not going to work 7 days a week. We are not going to work 12-hour days, and we are not working on our off days. We are taking vacation days, and we are not going to overwork ourselves. If you do this from the beginning on, it's going to become normal. You're going to expand the workload that you have to all those hours and all those days in the week, and you will 100% burn out after 1 or 2 years. It is not sustainable. You can definitely do this in short amounts of time, but you cannot do this for years. It's very bad for your health, and please do not get used to working long hours and long weeks. So it's much easier to work longer days if you're used to short days than work short days if you're used to working longer days. Now, to get back to that first video, that why video, if you haven't seen the other videos, go check those out first. I mentioned that it's really important to decide if you want this to be a full-time thing or if you want it to be a part-time thing, because this is going to determine how your day is going to look like. Your day might look really different if you come back home from work, maybe around 6, your energy is gone, and then you're going to have to dive into your creative work as well. That's very different than waking up, starting in the morning with your creative work, and then stopping at 6, for example. Ideally, if you want to pursue a creative art business, you're already working 3 or 4 days instead of 5. However, if you want to work towards something, you can definitely schedule some time around that 5-day work week. But I am going to tell you in advance, it's going to be very hard to do that next to a 40-hour work week. It takes a lot of energy, even though it's different energy, to do this next to a full-time job. It's pretty exhausting to work for more than 5 days a week. And that's why I said in the beginning as well, we are not going to do this 7 days a week. We are not going to work 12-hour work days because it is not sustainable in the long term. But just be mindful of how harsh you are to yourself, spending that time on your creative business when you are also working another job. You only have X amount of energy in a day, and if you spend all those hours, your energy hours in your full-time job, and you don't have any energy left for your creative hours, please don't be too harsh on yourself. I think it's impossible to do this part-time, so I'm already commending you for doing this and trying this if you do this part-time. I'm calling this a spark because I think everyone has this activity that gets you into the mood of being creative and actually having inspiration. It could be just getting out your sketchbook and drawing, it could be writing, it could be exercise or running, it could be going to a museum. It's different for everyone, but it's good to find out what works for you so that you always have this backup plan when your brain tells you, no, you are not feeling creative today. And now you're actually hacking your brain into feeling creative. Because not having inspiration, if art is your profession, is an excuse. And I know that might sound harsh because we do not feel inspired every day. I definitely don't feel inspired every day, but I do have to perform. I mean, if I have a client project and it's on a certain day and I feel terrible that day, there is something that in my brain that needs to be in a creative mood, because otherwise I won't be performing and someone is paying me to do something, for example, if it's a live illustration thing. I think that is the most set time where I have to be creative. It's just the truth when it's your profession. You just have to find that inspiration from somewhere. Otherwise you can just wait on something and nothing will happen. A lot of times not feeling inspired actually comes from fear. And it could be a fear of creating something that you're not happy about. It could be that your skill is not at the level that you want it to be. But it's most of the time not really related to feeling creative or feeling inspired, but mostly by fearing you're not going to make what you're actually wanting to make. It's okay, and it's actually better to make something imperfect because we learn from making mistakes. We definitely learn from making ugly drawings, ugly things. Those are just steps in a way to progress. So it's best to just get out of the way all the ugly things that you want to make and you feel like making in the beginning when it's not as important than when you actually have to perform for a client and have to do these things automatically. If you do not feel inspired that day, you're going to have to go out and find that inspiration for yourself. If I relate that to myself, for me, warm-up drawing does it. I don't know what to draw, but I just put in front of me a sketchbook and I go make tiny thumbnail drawings. And they're like small drawings with pencil. Sometimes I literally don't know what to draw, but I just move my hand across the paper and something will flow out. And sometimes it's not good. Most of the time it's not very good. However, I kind of get warmed up to the idea of using my hands to make something. And once I started painting, that fear of not making something nice is already out of my head because I put it on the paper. Some tiny thing can lead to a pretty big thing, and that idea that you might not have liked at the first time you made it might become a bigger thing later on. It might have just been something in your subconscious that has been living there and it just needed time to develop, and it just needed a few weeks or a few months or maybe a few years to develop into something good. But if you do not put that stuff on paper, if you feel not inspired enough to put something on paper, then it's never going out. It's always going to live in your subconscious, and you could never look at an idea that you put on paper later on that you can use for a bigger project. Just find that spark that works for you and start by doing it. So what would I do? Well, I used to draw a lot more. I used to draw a lot more than I do now, and I actually miss that. When I started out, I think I finished at least 1 or 2 drawings a day. And I worked on paper quite small because I was still working from my home. So I just had my table. I worked on A4 or on A3. So that was obviously a different skill than I work on now. But I made a lot more. So actually, I think I wouldn't change anything then. I would change it now. I would work more on drawings and experiments and just create every day. I had a really good work ethic, but also because I didn't have as much responsibility as I have now. I used to have a lot more time to create personal work and not focus as much on the client projects and the money side of it all. So that's a very different skill that we're working on now. I think I also drew as much because I was working at a side job just when I graduated and I really didn't like it. And those ideas just piled up and they piled up. And at some point when I said to myself, you are going to quit. This is dumb, you're not happy. All those ideas just wanted to get out, and I definitely used that time to put everything to paper. A few years later, the business side kicked in. As I said, my expenses went up. I had to spend more time on the business instead of the creative. And that kind of tipped the scales. So I also had other interests like video making and teaching. So I had to divide my time doing all those different things. Sometimes I do wish that I can go back to that time, because finishing a drawing or finishing a painting a day, it just gives such a big boost in confidence. Even if that drawing or that painting wasn't my best work, I still had something physical to present that I made that day. And it just feels really good. I think I was a little bit addicted to that feeling of getting that confidence boost as well. I sometimes get that feeling back, but mostly on smaller works, because you have that beginning and end process usually within an hour or a few hours. That just gets that feeling back. What I would do differently though, if I go back, was not change my work ethic, but I would change a little bit about thinking of the long term. I already had a certain art style because I did art school, and I developed my eye, I developed my way of seeing things that I liked and things that I didn't like. So that was already quite established, even though it developed a lot more over the years. But what I didn't work on that much was the depth of my work. I was mostly working on skill, I think, and I was working less on concepts and on my thoughts around it. And even though I could make those drawings or those paintings into series with concepts around it now, it would have been nice to know what I was thinking about then, because it's really hard to look back at it from now than just documenting it at that time. What I found more important then was the image, and what I think is more important now is not just the image, but also the story around it. A little bit of storytelling through a series of paintings or a series of works. And I didn't really do that much then. I think even something as simple as naming a body of work and just putting a dot at the end of a series of work that felt finished, that would have helped out a lot as well. So that's what I would have done. I think the most important thing in your work is to be consistent and to keep that consistency realistic and sustainable for yourself, because that's how you're going to keep at it for the long term instead of the short term and quitting on your ideas. It's very different per person. So it could be that you're drawing 3 drawings a day. And it could also be that you're drawing 3 drawings a month, and both are fine. But actually what might be more interesting for you and more sustainable is to set a goal of hours for yourself instead of results. So don't focus too much on the result, because then if one drawing doesn't work out, you feel like you have to make 4. So don't set unrealistic goals for yourself. But what could work is to set a timer for 3 hours a day. I don't know if you have 3 hours a day, but if you have it, and just sit at your desk and make something. And it doesn't have to be an end result. It could just be experimenting with materials. But it could also be finishing 3 drawings. And maybe one day you're making 3 drawings, maybe one day you're making 1. It depends on the day, but that way you don't focus on the end result, but more on the work in progress, which I think is way more important in the long term than the end result. Sometimes it's just not in your power to make something great. I mean, we do not always create our best work every day. I think we create our best work maybe once a year. Definitely not every day, so that's just how it is. But if you have the habit of making something, then at least you are working towards something. It could also be business related. It could also be set 1 hour a day to work on your business instead of 3 hours on creative work, for example. But it's good to have them side by side. To end this series, I want to say, please be nice to yourself. I know I am not nice to myself every once in a while. I can be very harsh to myself, and I'm never happy when I am not nice to myself. It never makes my work any better. It never makes me feel any better. It's good to be disciplined, I think, but in a certain way. Be nice if something just doesn't work out the way that you want it to work out. That's human, that's normal. We all have bad days, but just try to pick yourself up the next day or the next week. You can definitely take time off, but as long as it's not too long that you're forgetting what you're actually working on, and I think you'll be fine. If you've watched all these 4 videos so far in this chapter, and you know your why, you know your what, you know your long-term goals, and you know how you can be consistent, you are already further along than I was in 2018 when I just started. If that's the case for you, I am just giving applause to you, not doing it too loud because it's too loud on my microphone, but you are doing great, and please be nice to yourself in this process. Next chapter in this series will be about finances, everybody's favorite topic. We'll be going into the numbers, how I organize my finances around my business, and how you make it organized instead of just one big pile. But that will be up in the future.